just wanted to comment on the karaoke part. A poet named Tracy K. Smith, who had the opportunity to also come to the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. She's a dear friend, and we decided that we loved karaoke so much that we needed to chip in. When we were very, very poor and starting out, we needed to chip in for a karaoke machine so that we could sing to each other all the time. And then when we got tired of listening to each other and we thought we sang all the songs of the world, we then gave the karaoke machine away to a local eatery so we could go and visit the machine every once in a while and make the world suffer just a little bit less. So, thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was so kind. Thank you, Miles Kuhn. Thank you, Susan Williamson, Yadira Peralt, Marcy. I won't butcher your last name, but you have been such an important force in the classroom. And I want to give a huge shout out to my wonderful workshop. Tina Chang's workshop is the best. So I thought I would try to read a little bit of a range of work. I'll start off with a relatively new poem and then kind of go a little bit backwards and then try to end up with some newer work. So this first poem is called Milk. I have been concentrating a lot on fairy tales, and I've been quite interested in them. And I was asking myself, what is the modern day fairy tale? So I've been focusing on these stories that I've heard of young boys and young girls. There is a story of a young boy named Leiby Kletsky, and he was an 8-year-old Hasidic Jewish boy who was kidnapped while he was walking home from day camp on June 11th in 2011. He had asked his parents over and over if he could walk home from school alone, and of course, because he was 8 years old, his parents said, no, you cannot do that. But because he insisted, they eventually gave in, practiced the route home, and they really thought that he got it. And then on the day that he got out of summer camp, he turned in the wrong direction, and he asked someone for the directions home, and he never made it back. And I think that it was the details of his passing that I was just so affected by, and it was a huge news story in Brooklyn especially, because thousands upon thousands of Hasidic Jews came out and they looked for him for such a long time. And I do remember the news coverage of the day of his burial, how all the people in the neighborhood needed to reach out and touch his coffin. So it was incredibly moving, and I thought of him for a very long time. But I did not want to write a poem about his passing. I thought, what a sad poem to write. But the imagination is a very strange thing. Even if you don't want to write the poem, you still write the poem. So I was reading to my daughter, Mickey and the Night Kitchen. Has anybody ever read this book? It's a lovely book. If you have children, you've probably read it a lot, by the great writer Maurice Sendak. And in the book, it goes, milk in the batter, we bake cake, and nothing's the matter. In the Night Kitchen, Maurice Sendak. And this is called Milk. In every definition of home, my son conjures milk. The sun is milk. Milk spills through open doorways, bed of warm milk, face of milk, milk trousers, a truck full of milk. A milky light passes through the lens of my camera. All of his young life, my son thought of milk, and he asked for it each night. In every memory I have of him, his hands are outstretched, and he's asking for his last bottle. In every version of a life, I never refuse him. On the television, the nation listens to the story of Leiby Kletsky. Today, I think of his mother who waited for him, allowing him for the first time to walk home alone. In that definition of home, the boy promised to walk one straight line until he reached his front door. That morning, he held a key, heavy and shining, made especially for him. In the ancient story of boys, he headed up the street, past the lone dog, barking near the fire hydrant, past the circle of children, careening into their own shadows. And in the ancient story of boys, he walked through his front door, and this was his rite of passage. He placed his book bag on the coffee table, and the boy and the mother sat together in the large reading chair in the living room light. But this version isn't true. Tonight, I hold my son closer. As I put on his night clothes, I'm afraid of the world. I find all the stories horrifying. In the book of nursery rhymes, the old woman sends her son to bed without food. A king beats a knave for stealing pies. And the dog cannot find his bone, though he runs in circles day after day. Perhaps if I rewrite all the old stories, a new era will begin. Era of the forgiven, era of redemption, era of safekeeping. Tonight, milk stains my blouse, love so deep it runs from me. After the old stories are finished, my son says, the story again. I open the book, the owls lift from the pages. The lake is a bowl of night milk, and this a place so safe. We are weightless, buoyant in its murky sweetness, free from a promise that each new day startles us alive. And I thought I would, thank you. You can hold it till the end. That's very kind of you. So I am now going to read just a couple of poems from my second book. I also have to give a shout out to Martha Rhodes. Martha Rhodes was a person that published my very first book, and she's helped so many young writers get started, and I really appreciate just her vision and her hard work. And I was just thinking on the way over here, just how much dedication it takes to start a press and keep a press going. That takes a lot of work and a lot of courage and dedication to do that for so many years. So I thank her so much. So there's a figure, it was mentioned in the introduction that after 9/11, I kind of had this writer's block. I just couldn't write anymore because I was living in New York when everything happened, and I thought, if all these lives could be lost, what am I doing with my poetry? What is happening? So I stopped writing for a little while, and then I discovered this figure in history, and she was the Empress Dowager of China, and she was just so hard on everybody around her, and she was just walked through the world with no apologies whatsoever. She was the last empress of China, and she ruled the country through all the men because it couldn't be ruled by a woman. So she controlled all the men in her life, and there was something obviously very negative and controlling about her, and there was something about her that I needed to channel because it gave me a lot more courage to continue to write. And so I envisioned her life and wrote a set of persona poems. This first one is called, I'm doing a persona talk at AWP, and we're both talking, another participant and I are both talking about historical figures. While he stayed very, very close to the historical figure and the facts of his life, I kind of veered very far away from my historical figure and envisioned a new life for her. And this is called The Empress Dreams After a Poisoned Meal. Once the guards sprayed me down. I left my veil in a pool of my own waking, a pomegranate ruptured in my sleep, stains under my fingernails and on my ghost gown. When I rose, my maid played the music of my tragic birth. I miss my husband summoning, harmony swirling. I am always alone. Documents confirm I had many different names and official stamps that said I was born. I exhale smoke signals through a haze, a throat raw from yawning, feet bruised from tripping through the green maze. Soon the mechanical toys and wind-up clocks will be smashed and shot in the summer palace. Oh, the jewels, the hairpin of plum blossoms, ring of dragonflies circling above this chipped crown. Bring the gems into my room on someone's back. Let me model all my bracelets that anchor me to this empire. In the courtyard, I am a cat mewing with my collar on, fed with imperial poison. I sleep curled at the center, filled with lion dogs sniffing as if I were historical food. I never minded. My kingdom, one world beneath me. My sleeping sound. And I guess I was also thinking about her for this next poem, although this next poem has a lot more humor in it. But it was really inspired by reading a book of flora and fauna. And the word was birch tree in the book, but no matter how hard I tried to read the word correctly, I kept reading bitch tree. So I just wrote a poem, just sort of an ode to that kind of mistake. Bitch tree. I was sitting on the bitch tree, smirky and small, just me to myself with my hats on, a tulle dress, eating pomegranates, throwing seeds as the sun rose and fell into my body's mouth. There were no boo-hoos but murmurs, and people far below grew distant. Money fell out of the tree. Honey formed the sap. Spectators took photos as if a magic were to start, and none could capture my face when film met silver, only a halo around the bitch tree, but not the expression of the maker. Yes, I balked and I said, I never had a father. Through weather and the hard rain, my face a faucet hurling down, and still I sat on the branch, murdering berries with my fruit mouth, then became silent when it was night. No one was there to examine the bitch who shifted and grimaced only when there was an audience. An urge for urgency. My soul hangs like a puppet, knocks between my lungs, bends to the song of the sister peach tree. Love me when all the ripe clusters drop. I remembered my job and shook the leaves and howled like a monkey, wanting the next weather, the next instant, that high lightning barking from the boughs. So this is the last poem that I'll read from this collection. I have a tendency, if anybody's reading along, I change everything, so it doesn't matter if anybody's reading along because I'll just wind up changing everything that's in the book. So I'm just going to change the title right now to Evolution. And one of the things that was also mentioned so kindly in the introduction is that I'm a traveler, and also one of the ways that I dealt with what was happening after 9/11 is departing from America and traveling a good deal so that I could see America from the outside, just from a different perspective for a little while. So that helped me a great deal. And so every time I pause, it's a different place or a different country. And so it goes from, the first stanza is in Brazil, the second one is in Taiwan, and then I'm off to Tunisia, and then suddenly I'm in Brazil again. It's called Evolution. I'm the one in the back of the bar, drinking cachaça, fingering the lip of the glass. Every dream has left me now as I wait for the next song, drag and drum. There'll be no humming in this room, only fragrance of sweat and fuel to make the animal go, to make it hungry. After that, there is thirst. I danced in the border town until I was my grandest self hitchhiking, my slim arm out like the stalk of a tired flower, waving, silver rings catch the headlights. I'm not sure what I wanted as we rode on his motorcycle, where Chinese signs blurred past, flashing red and then blue, and I breathed in the scent of fish and plum. My hands found their way to his pockets as I rode without helmet, careening toward the cemetery. If the Tunisian black market was hidden within a maze, if I couldn't find my way, I asked the wide eyes of the boy who led me to the Mediterranean Sea. if I took his kindness as a version of truth and stood posing for a photo in front of bicycles leaned against the sand-colored walls, if I arrived at the center of the market, women and black muslin sold glazed tile on blankets. When I bent down, the men surrounded me. If they asked for money, I had nothing. If they threw their bills around me, I recall the purple and red faces crushed on paper. Perhaps it was chance that I ended on the far side of the earth, atrocities of our entanglement, not on the bed, but beside it, using our mouths for tools, for betterment, for completion. The vertebrae twists into a question mark to conform to another's. In the Pantanal, the cowboy studied the horses in the barn. One animal's labored breathing, the sigh of the coarse brush as it worked through the mane. Of the men I've known, you were the most steady, reliable one in the window, killing mosquitoes, gathering cool water to press to my scalp. One-sided heart I was then, selfish one. I wanted everything. Macaws flew past in quick flock, pushing outward toward the earth, scattering filament and mystery. I don't ask myself questions anymore. Rather, the statement was born, peeled like a film of dirt, wrapped inside a scarf, stuffed into my carry bag, rather that the camera caught all of it. When danger itself was restless, there was no purpose. This beast stalking pumped from its own engine of blood, centuries of evolution, first as a red-eyed embryo, then reptile, then mammal, then man. Pure racing, push of muscle and tendon, the tongue loose and dragging as the body made its way forward, each time more powerful, a new version of waking, until the species grew great wings and lifted. So I'm now going to go to some really recent poems. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to present a slideshow. Is that okay? I feel like that's always really good to kind of mix it up a little bit. I hope it works. If it doesn't, I'll just talk. It was working 2 seconds ago. Let's see. Let's see if it goes. There we go. Maybe some of you know this image. But wait. I'll just talk first. So in 2010, I had a son. I had to write it down or forget exactly what I wanted to say. So since having him, it's really changed dramatically my perspective about the world. So I no longer live as myself for myself, but as a being who protects and hunts and gathers and who safeguards his body. My son is Black, and the identity differs from the one that I grew up understanding in my female Asian body. I've re-examined my own identity along with his father's, along with my family. So we walk together now through the complexities of what our collective identities understand. And at our dinner table, we talk about unity. At our dinner table, we talk a lot about what America really is and who exactly represents us. Ultimately, when we speak as a family, we represent each other. And so everything that I'm doing right now is trying to create art that speaks to a human condition that asks for representation and interpretation and also, of course, protection. So there are a series of... It was working. I should just kept it where it was. Let me see. There we go. Okay. So I've been focusing on a series of artists lately, Kehinde Wiley, Alexandria Smith, and Kara Walker. And my hope is when I'm clicking through them, it'll just be so smooth and no mistakes will happen. So if you don't know anything about Kehinde Wiley's work, this is from his collection that he had at the Brooklyn Museum as well as other places because it traveled around the United States. It was called A New Republic, and it raises questions about race and gender and the politics of representation. And he often portrayed contemporary African-American men and women using the conventions of traditional European portraiture. So So portraits like this of everyday men and women, they riff on the specific paintings of the old masters, and it replaces these European aristocrats in these paintings with contemporary Black subjects, and they draw your attention to the fact that these African American men and women were really absent from historical and cultural narratives. And so the subjects in his paintings often wear sneakers and hoodies and baseball caps, and they are set against contrasting ornate backgrounds that evoke earlier eras. And if I could just quickly go to, this artist might be a little less well known, and her name is Andrea Smith, and I've always loved her work because I loved how the female figure is somehow contorted in some way, and she really tries to question the representation of particularly female Black characters, and usually the appendages, the arms and the legs are always in different places, and the head is always in unexpected places. And I just love her body of work. And maybe some of you might know Kara Walker's work. Kara Walker's work, I really stumbled upon it when I was quite young. She was probably quite young because we're not that different in age. And she had these slave narratives that were very large in size and that were very all-encompassing. So when I walked into the installation, you were just surrounded by these narratives that were so they were so horrific in terms of what they were telling, and at the same time, they were so beautifully made. So I'll just go, hopefully, back, and I hope it won't be as hard when I'm reading. That's the longest explanation for the shortest poem. So this is called Self-Styled for Portraits. Self-styled as Napoleon leading the army over the Alps, Kehinde Wiley. I never dreamed myself to be any larger than a horse. Perhaps this is strange. My girl body in the body of a man on a rapturous equestrian animal. I am not like the others. This was the song I sang since my birth, since I had a mouth to sing it. So I said it for years until I believed jewels fell out of my mouth. Son, I believe the mighty shall come. This is my only prayer. I shall be for you the man ascending the cliff until the steed I ride throws me into the pasture of the everlasting. I shall be a mother whose bright milk runs with a fever and an anguished love, with a head in my hands if the head shall equal justice. I shall be a father too, glorious and eternal. If this is blasphemy, let me love the world into fantastic horses, ride them to a distant country where I drown in brocade and fragrant vine. If I'm captured, let my kingdom be laced in mega gold. Let my cage be a godly frame. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Let me go the opposite direction, hoping that... There we go. So this is called Self-Styled as the Girl in Ribbons, Andrea Smith. If I am a girl in a traffic of legs, let them be trees. If I am a mouth, let there be a chorus of ruckus tongues. If I set sail, let it be along a tide of ribbons ebbing toward the widest America. Let there be hair, each strand running along a road, braided and rebraided until what remains is glory. Each face I wear leads to another face, and within that, a sister. If I could multiply myself, I couldn't be any more lonely. If you look carefully, there are many eyes gazing. I wonder if all the vigilance adds up to kindness. I once saw a child on a train sleeping. There was no guardian, no keeper, as she laid there breathing. If the eyes are shut, what does our dreaming see? The onlookers wondered where to place the girl, wondered if they should wake her, or by doing so they would create a space of abandon. Sometimes my heart is an alarm clock that wakes me to a startling sound. Sometimes I rise in a museum of wandering objects as the body imagines itself in pieces, fitted together, migrating with its lost parts in unison. This is self-styled as a woman beneath a woman, Kara Walker. There will be a day when women will be clouds. Each breath makes me a billow, worn like rain, spiraling out into a vision of winter. If history teaches me anything, it will be about the vagaries of burden. I can carry a vessel, a pitcher of water, a bundle of ideas like sticks. I carry time like fire. I hiccup and it's 2017, though the faces are the same, faces without faces and with different names. If we could all be more like clouds. If I run, the threat of a storm above slows me. If I lift my arms, the rain spills down. If I bend, my spine becomes a terrain on which a master treads. Sometimes I wish to unborn myself from this weather. If I could walk out from under this thunder, there would be such air, and my posture too could lift. If I unborn myself, I'd give up my sisters too, and my brothers by the bridge. So I'll stay lifting this largeness to live inside this cloud of kin. So I'll just end there. Thank you.